Hi everyone, my name is Niv Ashkenazi and this is Eye for Technique. Today we're going to be talking about how to buy the best bow in any budget. In this video, I'm going to tell you the exact steps that I've taken to purchase all of my bows, as well as the steps that I'm using to help students purchase bows for themselves. I've worked with budgets ranging from $100 all the way up to over $20,000, but of course I've also played on bows that are over $100,000. So these steps really work for any budget and for any bow that's handed to you, just to get a feel for the bow and to see whether you like it and whether it's a good bow for you. This video is going to focus on purchasing a bow with a budget anywhere from $100 to just under 10K. I'll have a separate video for purchasing a bow over 10K, and in that video I will talk about what I wish I knew when I was first purchasing my first bow that was over $10,000 and anything else that you might need to know if you're making that kind of purchase. Before we get into the steps, I want to give you two caveats and do a little bit of myth busting, and then we'll get right into the steps for buying your bow. Caveat number one is that other people will give you simpler advice. And you could probably see that based off of the length of this video and the length of some other people's videos. This is a comprehensive guide that will get you the best bow in your price range. This isn't a simple decision no matter what your budget is at. Each bow is unique, and so these steps will find you the best bow on the market at your price range. The second caveat is that I'm not going to tell you exactly which bow to get. And the reason for this is I have trusted makers that for old bows, for new bows that I like. I also have trusted companies that I like for cheaper bows. But each bow is unique. You have to try each bow because there are good ones and bad ones from every maker, every company, and you are looking for the best one that you can find. Now let's bust some myths. These are some things that you might see on the internet or hear from people, and people say that they're important, and in my opinion, they're really not. Myth number one, it is important what material your bow is made out of. This isn't really true. Sure, when you're talking about old, really expensive bows, they're gonna be made from Pernambuco wood. But in a lot of the other price ranges, you're gonna have bows made out of Brazil wood, which is a combination of woods, as well as carbon fiber. And carbon fiber, especially for the cheaper bows that are at around 100, a lot of the time outperform wood bows. So material doesn't really matter. What matters is what the bow sounds like and how it plays. For example, my spare carbon fiber bow, which cost about $120, was so good that at this point, I might actually rehair that bow rather than go and find a different carbon fiber bow. And a rehair costs $90, so obviously this isn't the most cost-effective thing. On the other hand, my expensive French bows are all made out of Pernambuco wood, and I love playing on them. So the important part is don't discard a bow based off of the material that it's made out of. Find a bow that you like. Myth number two. You should use the balance of the bow in your hand as part of your decision making. When someone is talking about that, they're saying just pick up the bow, and depending on how it feels when you just wave it around, you can decide whether the bow is good or not. This absolutely isn't true. I've tried over 1,000 bows in many different price ranges, and I can never 100% tell whether I would like a bow or not based off of how it feels in my hand without having it on the string. A bow is supposed to react to the string. It's supposed to sound and make a sound. If you don't know what it's like playing on it, you don't know if it's a good bow or not. Yes, some bows will feel heavier and some bows will feel lighter. Some bows are actually heavier and some bows are lighter. But a lot of the time we think we have a preference, and we're very bad at guessing whether our preferences are correct. So you should always try out a bow, never discard it just from your first initial impression before it touches the string. I have multiple bows, and my most expensive bow actually feels very light, and this bow, which I use currently, feels a lot heavier than it. Each bow feels quite different and is balanced differently, but I love all the bows that I've purchased, no matter what the price range or how they feel. The third myth is that it matters whether the stick of the bow is round or octagonal. Honestly, when I ran into this, I was extremely surprised. I saw it all over, and this never was a concern for me when purchasing bows. I didn't really know that it made a difference. In terms of whether you should buy a bow or not, it doesn't make any difference. What it actually does is an octagonal bow is usually a bit stronger than a round bow, but that really depends on the wood and everything else about the bow. Some bows need to have a stronger stick to really work well, and some need a more flexible stick to work well. So just going off of whether it's octagonal or round is not a good way of picking a bow. Now that we're ready to try bows, I'm operating under a few assumptions. The first one is that you already have an instrument that you like or are not about to upgrade your instrument anytime soon. The reason for this is that we always want to match our bow to the instrument. Each bow really changes the sound of an instrument, and a bow that sounds good with one instrument might not sound as good with another instrument. So you want to first have the instrument that you want and then match a bow to it. I'm also assuming that you know your budget. You need to go in knowing how much you're willing to spend. Because a lot of the times when you go into a shop, they will ask you, what is your budget? You need to be able to tell them what your top end is, and they will then be able to provide you bows to try. If you aren't sure how much you should spend on a bow, one shop that I trust suggests spending 20% of the value of your instrument. This might be too high for you, and that's okay. These steps will still get you the best bow you can afford. It might be too low and you can spend more, and that's wonderful too, because sometimes a better bow can make an instrument sound even better than it normally would. Buying a bow is a process. You aren't going to go into a shop and find a bow and purchase it on the spot. These steps are meant for you to whittle down your options down to maybe 2 to 4 bows that you can take home, try, and see how you feel with them. Only after you get to know the bow, that's when you'll go back to the shop and actually purchase the bow. Things always feel and sound different when you're out of the shop. And of course, if you have a teacher, you want your teacher to try the bow and give you some feedback as well. Here's something that's very important when buying bows. You need to make sure to not look at the price. You will tell the shop what price point you can afford, but after that, you don't want to know the individual price of the bows while trying them. The reason for this can really influence your judgment and your ear. It can influence even professionals. So you want to have a blind test, and then afterwards, you can find out the pricing on these bows. Remember, you're looking for the best bow, the best sounding bow, the best playing bow, not the cheapest bow, the best deal, or anything like that. You're looking for a bow that you can trust and grow with. The way I like to test bows is by doing one single test on every single bow that I'm trying in my price range. Then, once I've eliminated the bows that have failed this test, I'll go back for another pass on another test and really just check one thing at a time on these bows. Our first step for buying a bow is to see whether a bow bounces. This is important because not every bow can bounce. If the bow can't bounce, that's a problem with the bow. Now, you might not have learned bounce bow techniques, and you might not even learn bounce bow techniques on this bow, but you still want to have a bow that fully functions. There's no point in playing on a bow that can't do everything that it needs to be able to do. Unlike when we try violins, in which case we're looking for how it sounds first, with bows, I really don't care how it sounds at first. All I care about is whether it bounces. If it doesn't bounce, I throw away that bow. The way I test the bow for whether it bounces is by using a sautier technique, which is when you bounce the bow very quickly. If you haven't learned sautier yet, that's fine. I'm going to cover what you should do in a minute. The way I like to test for bounce is starting with a sautier and then adjusting the speed down to as slow a spiccato as I can, and then bringing it right back to a sautier. So I'll start with the bow usually on the string, beginning the sautier stroke, and then I will alter it. And what I'm looking for is how much control do I have in my bounce with this bow. As you can see, I am changing where I am in the bow, and that's part of how I'm testing it. Of course, the bounce point will be different on each bow, and also you want a different part of the bow for each type of stroke. When it's slowing down, you might want to go lower in the bow. When it's higher up, you might be able to have a better sautier. Again, if the bow doesn't bounce at all, just get rid of the bow. That is all we're looking for in this first step. Sautier is a pretty advanced technique, and even if you do know how to do it, you might not be consistent with it. And so in that case, what I would suggest is have your teacher come with you to try out at the bows for the first round. And if your teacher can't come with you, skip this step and just make sure that your teacher tries some sautier on the bow for you before you purchase it. If the bow is kind of bouncing, but not bouncing very well, you can also check how tight it is. It might be that the bow isn't tightened enough. I've had that happen with a few bows. Now, please don't go overboard with this advice, but if you want to bounce your bow, you can always tighten it a little bit and see if that helps. For our second pass, what we're going to be looking for is the sound and the overall colors that you can get out of the bow. For this pass, I like to play the opening of the Bruch Concerto because it starts on the G string, goes all the way up to the E string. There are a variety of positions that you're in, as well as a variety of dynamics that you can do, different bow speeds. Basically, you can find a lot of colors and really test out the bow and see what it can do. You don't actually have to play the opening of the Bruch Concerto. You can play any piece that is lyrical, that gives you options for hearing the sound that the bow makes with your particular violin. You're just looking for something that can highlight a beautiful, rich, diverse sound. In this pass, your goal is to try and make the bow sound as beautiful as you can. Be inspired by the bow. What sounds does the bow want you to make? But also, have a sound in mind sometimes and see whether the bow can handle creating the sounds you want as well. Many times I'll actually over-exaggerate in this section. I might not play it exactly how I would if I was playing it in concert. I might push the bows to their limits, see how many different colors I can get. For this pass, I often don't get rid of any bows yet, but I'm starting to assess each bow and see which bow has the most colors, which one has the least, and which one is maybe in the middle. So I'm starting to get information about these bows, and for the next couple passes, it's more gathering information than actually discarding bows. Once I know that there's a couple bows that are better than the rest, then I might start discarding some bows. My third pass is focused on the classical period. The classical period is important to explore because a lot of bows sound really great on romantic music, but the classical period is very distinctive and takes a lot of fine bow control to get the right style. So we want to make sure that the bow can really play in that style. I've played on a lot of bows that sound great overall, but just can't really play classical music in the way I would like. The excerpt that I like to use for this is the beginning of Mozart's Concerto No. 3. If you don't have this particular excerpt ready, any classical period music can work for this. I really like Mozart because he has a very distinctive style, and so it makes me really have to work hard to get that style with that bow. But really, any classical period composer would work, and even some late Baroque things can sometimes work for this. For this pass, I'm just trying to make it as stylistic as I can. For example, if you're playing Mozart, play it as Mozartian as you can. Really go over the top and see if the bow can handle what you want it to do. For your fourth pass, you want to check how well your bow plays chords. I usually pick some solo Bach for this, but whatever excerpt you use doesn't really need to have a lot of chords or double stops in it. It just needs to have a little bit in order to get a feel for how the bow handles on the string when it's playing multiple strings. You want to be comfortable when playing chords and double stops, and some bows really feel like they're just shoving themselves out of the strings, and so you want to find a bow that feels good for double stops and chords. By this point, if a bow has failed a pass, I put it on probation. If it starts failing multiple passes, then it's probably time to let that bow go. The excerpt that I like to do for this pass is Bach's Sonata No. 1, the Adagio, just the opening of it. If you don't have any solo Bach, you can really just use any small group of chords. So for example, you could just play a G major chord, a D major chord, and a G major chord, just. Or you could add one more chord in there. Basically, the whole point is just to try a few chords and see how the bow reacts. For the fifth pass, I like to focus on soft playing. Now, probably by now you've played softly on the bow, but it has been a part of a different pass. So we're dedicating this pass to listening to how well the bow can play soft passages. Many bows sound great at a loud volume, but don't really sound good in soft passages. This is the final official pass, so you can be pretty brutal about getting rid of bows at this point. You already know how they did on all the other passes, and if they did pretty mediocre on those passes and can't play soft, those are bows that you should probably get rid of. I like to do the meditation from Thais for this, just the very opening. It starts off nice and soft, but there are also some dynamic changes and sudden pianos that you have to be able to hit. If you don't have Meditation from Thais ready to go, you can play any soft passage from any of your pieces. You're just trying to get as beautiful a sound as you can that is also as soft as you can. By now, hopefully you have narrowed down your selection by quite a bit. If you haven't already gotten down to up to 4 bows, then we can do the optional 6 pass and beyond. Essentially, the passes from here on out is just keep trying the bows and keep getting rid of them. You can play the same pieces, you can play multiple pieces back to back, you can compare just all your bows against your favorite bow until it fails. You have lots of options here of how to do it, but this is just the narrow it down no matter what so that you get down to 2 to 4 bows to take home. Know that the bows that are left right now are all good bows. You're gonna go home with great bows to try. So trust your gut and get rid of the bows that you think aren't as good. And if you leave some behind, you can always come back and try them next time. Sometimes it takes a lot of passes to narrow the bows down, and other times by pass 4 or 5, I already have a pretty strong idea of which bows I want to take home. Though it doesn't happen often, there's always the chance that you don't like any of the bows that are there. In that case, go home, wait a little time, maybe like 2 weeks to 2 months, and come back and try again. There might be new bows that are in stock at that point, and so you'll get a different selection. So to summarize, here are the things that you need to remember. Always have a professional try out a bow before you buy it. You want to get a professional's opinion because they know what bows are supposed to sound like, what they're supposed to feel like, how they're supposed to play, and that is invaluable information for you. Of course, each person's different, so the professional will be biased towards certain bows, but it's still going to give you a good idea of whether the bows that you picked are going to be good and are the ones that you should consider purchasing. Even if you don't have a large budget, my belief is that you want to get the most value for your money. The equipment that you use really affects how easy it is to play, how good you sound, and how easy it is to progress. So it's really important to maximize in this situation. As I mentioned at the beginning, this is a very comprehensive way of trying out bows, but it is because you want to find the best bow for your price range. There are faster ways to try bows, and you'll probably do okay. But this way, you will get the best bow that you can for your budget. For bows in around the $100 to $300 range, don't sniff at those carbon fiber bows. A lot of the times, they are the better bows, and the technology has come a lot further than where it was. When I was a student back in the 90s, the wood bows that I got for $500 and $1,000 wouldn't even compare to the $100 carbon fiber bows that we have available today. Don't worry about the material of the bow, and if you find a great carbon fiber bow, go for it. Bows are way harder to choose than violins. Violins can really sound distinctive and continue to sound distinctive even after you take them home and try them a bunch. Bows, a lot of the times, start to sound the same. They really aren't the same, and it's just how our ears hear it. But if you're finding trouble differentiating between the bows, take a break, let your ears rest, and come back and try again. And though it might not seem like it based off of this video, the most important thing in buying a bow is go and have fun. You are there to try a bunch of different bows. It's a wonderful opportunity. Each bow has a unique voice and makes your instrument sound different. Have fun trying them. Do many different trials with them. Try many different pieces and just enjoy the process.